Abandoned but still hopeful. The story of a loyal dog finding a forever home. Part 1. Left behind. The night was cold, and the sky was painted in deep shades of gray. Thick clouds covered the stars, making the world seem even lonelier than it already was. The sound of rain echoed through the quiet suburban street, each drop hitting the pavement like a whisper of sorrow. At the corner of an empty lot, near an old rusted gate, sat a dog alone, wet and shivering. His golden brown fur was soaked from the storm, clinging to his frail frame, and his deep brown eyes stared at the empty road ahead. He wasn't just sitting there for no reason. He was waiting for someone who was never going to return, a happy beginning that didn't last. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when the dog, who once had a name, had a home, a bed, and a person he loved more than anything in the world. His name was Charlie. Charlie had belonged to a man named Daniel, a construction worker who lived alone. Their life together had been simple but full of love. Every morning, Charlie would wake up to the sound of Daniel getting ready for work. He would wag his tail excitedly as Daniel poured food into his bowl, always giving him a playful pat on the head before heading out. Charlie's favorite part of the day was when Daniel came home. No matter how long the day had been, no matter how exhausted his owner was, Daniel always greeted him with a warm smile, scratching behind his ears and saying, "Hey, buddy, did you miss me?" And Charlie always did. They would take long walks through the neighborhood, Charlie trotting happily beside him, sniffing every tree and chasing after birds. Sometimes, they would sit on the porch together in the evenings, Daniel sipping a beer while Charlie rested his head on his lap. It was the kind of companionship that didn't need words, just presence. But something changed. It was subtle at first. Daniel started coming home later, looking more tired, more distant. Some nights, he didn't greet Charlie at all, just walked straight to his room and shut the door. There were phone calls filled with angry voices, arguments with someone Charlie didn't know. The air in the house felt heavier. And even though Charlie didn't understand human problems, he could feel something was wrong. Then, one day, Daniel didn't come home at all. Charlie waited by the door, his tail wagging slightly every time he heard a noise outside. But as the hours passed, hope turned into confusion. The next morning, Daniel finally returned, but he wasn't alone. A woman was with him, someone Charlie had never seen before. She was younger, dressed in expensive clothes, and didn't even glance at him. The days that followed were different. Daniel no longer had time for their walks. Some nights, the woman stayed over, and Charlie was left outside on the porch, staring at the closed door, wondering why he wasn't allowed in anymore. Then came the car ride, the ride that changed everything. It was supposed to be like any other trip. Charlie loved car rides. Every time Daniel opened the passenger door and let him jump in, it felt like an adventure. The wind rushing through his fur, the sights speeding past, it was freedom. But this time was different. There was no excitement in Daniel's voice, no playful ruffle of his fur before they drove off. The woman was with them too, sitting in the front seat, staring at her phone, barely acknowledging Charlie's existence. They drove for what felt like hours. The city faded into smaller roads, leading to places Charlie had never been before. Trees lined the streets, and the smell of unfamiliar scents filled his nose. Then, the car slowed down. They pulled over near an old, deserted neighborhood, one where the houses were abandoned and overgrown with weeds. It smelled like dust and rust, like a place that had been forgotten by time. Daniel stepped out first. He opened the back door, and Charlie, always trusting, leaped out with his tail wagging. But there was no excitement in Daniel's movements. No leash, no toys, just silence. Then, before Charlie could react, Daniel got back into the car. Charlie watched, confused. As the door slammed shut, he took a step forward, tilting his head, waiting for Daniel to call him back. But Daniel didn't. Instead, the car started moving. At first, Charlie thought it was a game. He chased after the car, barking, his paws hitting the pavement as hard as they could. He ran as fast as his legs would take him, his breath coming out in short gasps. But the car didn't slow down. It didn't turn around. It just kept going. Charlie kept running until his legs gave out. until he tripped and rolled onto the ground, his body too tired to move. He lay there, panting, his heart racing, but the car was already gone, and he was alone, waiting for someone who would never return. Charlie didn't understand. He waited in the same spot for hours, his eyes fixed on the road. Every time he saw a car pass, he perked up, his tail wagging weakly, hoping it was Daniel coming back for him. But every car kept driving. Night fell, and with it came the cold. Charlie curled up near an old iron gate, shivering, his body aching from exhaustion. He didn't know what he had done wrong. He didn't know why Daniel had left him. All he knew was that he had to wait. And so he did. Days passed, then weeks. Charlie never left that spot. He survived on scraps, drinking from puddles, his once shiny coat turning dull and matted. His ribs became more visible, his legs weaker. People passed by, but no one stopped. Some shooed him away when he got too close. Others simply ignored him. But still, he waited. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, turning the sky into a mixture of orange and purple, a car pulled up near the gate. Charlie, too tired to stand, lifted his head slightly. His ears twitched as the car door opened. A woman stepped out, her voice soft as she whispered, "Hey there, buddy." For the first time in weeks, someone had stopped for him, and little did Charlie know, this was the moment his life was about to change forever. Part 2. The Woman Who Stopped. The last few weeks had been nothing but an endless cycle of waiting and disappointment for Charlie. Every car that passed, every footstep on the pavement, every voice in the distance, all made his heart leap with hope, only for reality to crush it moments later. But this time was different. The car had stopped. A woman had stepped out, and for the first time since he had been abandoned, someone was speaking to him, not to chase him away, not in irritation or fear, but with kindness. "Hey there, buddy." Her voice was soft, gentle, carrying none of the harshness Charlie had grown used to from strangers. He lifted his head slightly, his eyes tired but watchful. He had learned not to trust too quickly. The woman knelt a few feet away, not approaching too fast, not making any sudden movements. She had been around animals before, he could tell. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" Charlie didn't move. He only stared, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of waiting. He had stopped expecting kindness, but she didn't give up. First contact. The woman reached into her bag and pulled out something small. Food. The scent hit Charlie's nose immediately. It was something fresh, something far better than the scraps and garbage he had been surviving on. His stomach tightened with hunger, but still, he hesitated. She placed the food on the ground and backed away. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Charlie watched her carefully, his instincts screaming to be cautious. He had chased after food before, only for humans to shoo him away the moment he got close. But she wasn't moving. Slowly, hesitantly, he took a few steps forward. His paws, once strong and steady, felt weak beneath him. His legs shook, but his hunger was stronger than his fear. He sniffed the food, his ears flicked, listening for any sign of a trap. Then, with one final glance at the woman, he took a bite, and when nothing bad happened, he took another. The woman didn't move. She simply watched, patiently, as Charlie ate his first real meal in weeks, building trust. For the next few days, the woman kept coming back. Every evening, just as the sun was setting, her car would pull up near the old gate. She never rushed him, never forced him to come close, never grabbed him like the other strangers had tried to do. She simply brought food, placed it on the ground, and sat a few feet away, talking to him in a soothing voice. "I don't know if you can understand me, but you're a good boy. You must have had a family once, someone who loved you. I wish they hadn't left you here." Charlie didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. There was something in her voice he hadn't heard in a long time, warmth. At first, he would eat only after she backed away, but as the days passed, he began moving a little closer. Then, one evening, something unexpected happened. As she placed the food down, she hesitated for a moment before reaching out her hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. An invitation. Charlie froze, his body tensed, ready to run. But she didn't grab at him. She didn't force it. She simply held her hand out and waited. And after what felt like forever, Charlie took a cautious step forward, then another. His nose brushed against her fingertips. For the first time in weeks, he felt the touch of a human hand that didn't bring pain or rejection. The decision. The woman knew she couldn't leave him there forever. She had been patient, but Charlie was weak. He wouldn't last much longer on the streets. His fur was matted, his ribs too visible beneath his golden coat. So that night, she made a choice. "Hey, buddy, how would you feel about coming home with me?" She spoke softly, as if she knew the weight of the question. Charlie simply blinked, unaware that his life was about to change again, but this time, for the better. She reached into her bag and pulled out something new. A leash. Charlie froze. The sight of it triggered something deep inside him. Memories of being taken places and left behind. Memories of being tied up, pulled, controlled. His heart pounded. Was she going to take him somewhere and leave him too? Sensing his panic, the woman didn't force it. "It's okay, sweetheart. No one's going to hurt you." She left the leash on the ground and backed away again, giving him the space to decide. Charlie hesitated. He looked at the food, then at her, then at the leash. It was a choice, trust or run. And this time, he didn't run. The first ride home, Charlie didn't step forward immediately. He simply stood there, staring at her. Then, slowly, cautiously, he nudged the leash with his nose. The woman smiled. "Okay, let's get you out of here, buddy." She gently clipped the leash to his worn collar. When he didn't pull away, she took that as a sign. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go home." For the first time since he had been abandoned, Charlie moved forward, not chasing a car that would never stop, but walking towards someone who had. The car door opened. A moment of hesitation. Then, with a final glance at the street he had called home for far too long, Charlie jumped into the car. The woman shut the door. Charlie curled up in the seat, exhausted but not afraid. As the car began to move, taking him away from the place where he had once been left behind, he finally let out a long, slow sigh. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't waiting anymore. He was going home. Part 3. Learning to trust again. The car ride was silent except for the steady hum of the engine. Charlie curled up in the back seat, his body tense but too exhausted to move. The woman glanced at him through the rearview mirror, careful not to overwhelm him with sudden movements or loud noises. "You're safe now, buddy," she murmured. But Charlie didn't know that yet. He had spent weeks surviving on his own, waiting for someone who never returned. Trust wasn't something he could give easily anymore. The smell of the car was different from Daniel's. The sounds, the touch, even the feeling of the soft blanket she had laid in the back seat for him, it was all unfamiliar. And unfamiliar meant danger. His ears twitched at every turn, every passing car. His mind was stuck in survival mode. Was this a trick? Would she take him somewhere and leave him behind again? He didn't sleep. He couldn't. And then, after what felt like forever, the car slowed to a stop. Charlie lifted his head slightly. A new place. The woman turned off the engine and opened her door. "All right, sweetheart, let's go inside." A new home, but not yet home. Charlie hesitated. The last time he had gotten out of a car, he had been abandoned. This place was different. The air smelled fresh, full of grass and trees. The house in front of them wasn't too big, but it looked warm, lived in. Lights glowed softly through the windows, and the scent of something comforting, maybe food, drifted through the air. The woman walked around to the back door and slowly opened it. "Come on, buddy. It's okay." Charlie didn't move. She didn't force him. Instead, she crouched a few feet away, setting down another small bowl of food. The smell reached him instantly, but this time, hunger didn't control him. Fear did. What if this was another test? Another false hope? His body trembled as he stared at her, unsure. Then, something unexpected happened. A new voice. "Mommy, is this him?" A little girl appeared in the doorway, no older than 6, her curly brown hair bouncing as she ran toward them. Charlie flinched and backed deeper into the car. Too fast, too loud, too much. The woman quickly placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Shush, sweetie. He's scared. We have to be gentle." The little girl's wide eyes met Charlie's, filled with curiosity, not pity, not fear, just pure innocence. "Can I say hi?" she whispered. The woman nodded. And then, instead of running toward him again, the little girl sat down, just like her mother had done the first time she approached him. She didn't hold out her hands. She didn't make any sudden movements. She just sat there, her small legs crossed, her voice soft as she said, "Hi, puppy. I'm Lily. You can come out when you're ready." Charlie watched. She wasn't demanding. She wasn't pushing him to trust her. She was simply waiting, just like he had been waiting. For the first time, it was someone else's turn to wait for him. The first night, Charlie finally stepped out of the car, his body low to the ground, tail tucked, every muscle in his body ready to run. But no one grabbed him. The woman stood up and walked toward the house. The little girl followed. Neither of them forced him to follow, but somehow, he did. One step, then another. And before he could even understand why, he was inside the house. It smelled clean, soft, warm. There was a big couch in the living room, a fireplace flickering gently, a soft dog bed in the corner, a dog bed. For a moment, something deep inside his heart ached. He had had one of these once. A soft place to rest, a warm house, a person to belong to. Would this place be like the last one? Would he be welcome here for a little while, only to be pushed aside again when he became inconvenient? The woman set down another bowl of food and fresh water. "Eat if you want to, sweetheart. No rush." Then she and the little girl left him alone in the living room, giving him space. Charlie didn't move for hours. He just stood there, staring at the dog bed. Was this a dream? Or was this another place where he would only be temporary? That night, he didn't sleep. He lay curled up near the front door, his ears twitching at every sound, waiting for someone to open the door and force him out. But no one did. The days that followed, Charlie didn't trust easily. For the first few days, he barely moved from his spot near the door. He ate, but only when no one was watching. He drank water quickly, as if afraid it would be taken away. He flinched at sudden movements. He avoided hands reaching out to touch him, but they never gave up on him. The woman, her name was Emily, talked to him softly every day, never forcing him to come near, never rushing him. Lily, his tiny new human, was always gentle, always patient. She would sit near him and draw pictures, talking to him in her small voice about the things she loved. "I have a teddy bear named Mr. Fluffy. He's my best friend. Maybe you can be my best friend too one day." Charlie listened. He wasn't sure yet, but he listened. And then, on the fifth night, something small but important happened. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch. Emily picked her up gently, carrying her to bed. Charlie watched. Something about the way she held the child, the way she tucked her in, the way she kissed her forehead, whispering, "Good night, sweetheart," made something stir inside him. It reminded him of love. And love wasn't something he had felt in a long time. The first step toward trust. That night, Charlie didn't sleep by the door. He moved, just a little, closer to the living room, closer to them. Emily noticed, but she didn't say anything. She just smiled. And the next morning, when Lily woke up and saw him sitting near the couch instead of the door, she grinned. "Mommy, look, he stayed with us." Emily nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. He's learning that he belongs here now." And for the first time, Charlie started to believe it too. Part 4, Learning to Love Again. Charlie had spent weeks in survival mode, never fully resting, always prepared to run. Even now, as he lay near the couch instead of by the door, his ears twitched at every sound. His body was still tense, still unsure. But something was changing. He was beginning to observe. He watched how Emily woke up early to make breakfast, how she hummed softly in the mornings, how she spoke in a calm, steady voice. He watched how Lily bounced around the house, full of excitement, always talking, always creating imaginary adventures with her stuffed animals. She would tell him stories, showing him her drawings, even though he never moved closer to her. He watched how, every evening, Emily tucked Lily into bed, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, whispering, "I love you, sweetheart." And slowly, something inside of him started to thaw. For the first time in a long time, Charlie didn't feel like he was waiting for something bad to happen. For the first time, he started to wonder if maybe this place, this family, was different. The first tail wag. It was a week after Charlie had arrived. Emily and Lily had been patient, giving him space, showing him kindness without forcing trust. And then, one morning, something small but monumental happened. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, kicking her little legs as she ate her cereal. Emily was making coffee. Charlie, as always, lay nearby, watching. And then Lily, completely unaware of what she was doing, dropped a piece of toast on the floor. It landed near Charlie's paws. For a moment, he just stared at it, as if waiting for someone to yell at him, to snatch it away. But no one did. Instead, Lily giggled. "You can have it, puppy," she said, smiling. "It's yours." Charlie hesitated, but then he reached out and took it. And in that moment, as he chewed the small piece of toast, his tail wagged, just once, just a tiny flick. Emily saw it. Lily saw it. Neither of them reacted too loudly, not wanting to startle him. But Lily beamed. "Mommy, did you see?" He wagged his tail. "He's happy." Emily smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart. He's starting to trust us." And for the first time since arriving, Charlie felt the smallest spark of hope. Maybe this was home, the first nap in peace. Charlie hadn't truly slept in a long time. Even at night, when the house was quiet, he only dozed lightly, never letting himself fall too deep. But one afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the windows, something changed. Lily was sitting on the floor, coloring. Emily was reading a book on the couch. The air was peaceful, calm, and Charlie, curled up on the rug, felt safe enough to let his eyes close. Not just a light nap, not just resting while staying alert. He slept. For the first time in weeks, months. Even, he truly, deeply slept. His breathing slowed. His body relaxed. He didn't wake up at every small sound. And when he finally stirred, blinking sleepily, Lily was sitting near him, watching. "You looked happy," she whispered. "I hope you had good dreams." Charlie stared at her, blinking, and then, without thinking, his tail wagged again, a little faster this time, and Lily smiled the brightest smile. The first touch. Even though Charlie was beginning to trust, he still flinched when hands reached for him. It wasn't something he did consciously, it was a reflex, something learned from too many bad experiences. Emily understood. She never forced contact. She let him come to her in his own time. And then, one evening, he did. Emily was sitting on the couch, watching the rain fall outside. The house was quiet, peaceful. Charlie, as always, lay a few feet away, but something inside him urged him to move. Slowly, cautiously, he lifted his head and stood up. He took one step forward, then another. Emily didn't move. She didn't speak. And then, very gently, Charlie pressed his head against her knee. It was small, simple, but it was everything. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she reached out, not to grab him, not to restrain him, just to let her fingers brush through his fur. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice full of warmth. Charlie didn't pull away. For the first time, he let himself be touched without fear, and it felt nice. The moment everything changed, Charlie was changing. He no longer stayed near the door. He no longer ate only when no one was watching. And one morning, something incredible happened. Emily and Lily were getting ready for the day. The front door was open just a little, a test of trust. And Charlie, who had once spent weeks waiting by the door, expecting to be left behind again, did something unexpected. He walked away from the door. Instead of seeing it as an escape, instead of thinking he needed to leave before someone made him, he turned and walked back toward Emily and Lily. Emily noticed. She didn't say anything, not wanting to startle him, but when she felt a soft nose press against her hand, when she turned and saw Charlie standing there, not because he had to be, But because he wanted to be, her heart swelled. "You're home now, buddy," she whispered. "And you never have to leave again." Charlie looked up at her, and this time, his tail wagged fully, happily, freely, without hesitation. Part 5. Finally home. Charlie had come a long way. From the starving, abandoned dog who spent weeks waiting by a rusted gate for an owner who would never return, to the cautious, silent shadow that had first entered Emily's home. He was no longer that dog. He was still learning, still healing, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was living. The first playtime. It started as a normal afternoon. Emily was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. Lily was outside, running around the backyard, her small feet kicking up the autumn leaves that had fallen across the grass. Charlie had been resting near the porch, watching, always watching. Then, Lily picked up a tennis ball. She turned to Charlie, holding it up with an excited grin. "Wanna play, puppy?" Charlie stiffened. Play? That word felt foreign. He had vague memories of it, faint images of running through a park with Daniel, of catching sticks, of rolling in the grass without a care in the world. But that was a long time ago, before he was left behind, before he learned that excitement could turn into disappointment. Lily didn't push him. She simply bounced the ball on the ground and then tossed it gently across the yard. It rolled a few feet away. Charlie watched it. Then, for reasons even he didn't understand, he stood up. Lily's eyes lit up. Charlie took a step forward, then another. His paws hesitated as he reached the ball, and then, slowly, he lowered his head and picked it up in his mouth. Lily squealed with joy. "Mommy, look, he got it. He's playing." Emily peeked out from the kitchen window, and when she saw Charlie standing there with the ball in his mouth, his tail wagging just a little, her heart swelled with happiness. She had never forced him to play, never rushed him, but now, he was choosing it on his own. And for Charlie, that choice meant everything. The first true smile. Over the next few weeks, Charlie's transformation became undeniable. He no longer hesitated when Emily reached out to pet him. He no longer watched the door with uncertainty, afraid that one day it would close behind him and never open again. He ate without fear. He rested without worry. And most importantly, he smiled. It was subtle at first, a certain softness in his eyes, a slight relaxation of his face. Then, one morning, as Lily wrapped her small arms around him in a gentle hug, Charlie did something that made Emily pause in shock. He leaned into the hug, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. His tail thumped softly against the floor, and then, a real, undeniable smile stretched across his face. Emily had read somewhere that dogs can't actually smile the way humans do. But she knew, in that moment, that was a lie, because Charlie was smiling, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The final test, the open gate. One day, a mistake happened. Lily had been playing outside, running back and forth between the backyard and the house. She was carrying her favorite stuffed animal, Mr. Fluffy, giggling as she ran. But in her excitement, she forgot to close the gate. It wasn't until Emily glanced out the window that she realized the gate was wide open. Her heart dropped. Charlie was standing just a few feet away from it. The old Charlie, the one who had been left behind, who had spent weeks waiting for someone who would never return, would have run, would have bolted down the street, searching for something he had lost, something he had never fully understood. But this Charlie simply looked at the open gate and then turned away. He didn't run. He didn't even hesitate. Instead, he walked toward Lily, who was now crouched on the grass, trying to fix Mr. Fluffy's loose stitching. Charlie laid down beside her, pressing his body close, as if to say, "I'm staying." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. Tears stung her eyes. She had spent so long wondering if Charlie would ever understand, if he would ever truly believe that this was his home, that he didn't have to run, that he didn't have to wait anymore. And now, he had chosen them. He had chosen to stay, and that meant more than words could ever express. The forever home. Years passed. Charlie grew older, but never weaker. He still played with Lily, still sat with Emily on quiet evenings, still wagged his tail every single time he saw them. He had been abandoned once, but he had been found again, and this time, it was forever. One night, as Emily sat on the couch, Charlie curled up beside her, resting his head on her lap. She stroked his fur gently, whispering, "I hope you know how much you're loved." Charlie didn't respond, not with words, but as he sighed contentedly, his eyes closing, his body relaxed and completely at peace. Emily knew he understood, and for the rest of his days, Charlie was never alone again, because love, once lost, can always be found again. And for Charlie, it finally had been the end. Charlie's journey was one of loss, survival, and, most importantly, healing. This story is a tribute to rescue dogs everywhere, the ones who have been left behind but never lose hope, and the families who open their hearts to give them the love they deserve. Thank you for being part of Charlie's journey. Charlie's journey reminds us that love, once lost, can always be found again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment below. And if you believe every dog deserves a second chance, subscribe to Dog Discoveries with Florence for more inspiring stories of loyalty, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between dogs and humans.